She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't curse. She doesn't even look angry. She just sets the tray down, silver cloche on linen napkin, and says, "I thought this would be more fitting for someone like you." No eye contact. No smile. She lifts the lid. The cabin doesn't gasp, not yet, because no one expects it to be real. But it is, and by the time they realize what they're looking at, he hasn't moved. No reaction. No rage. Just eyes that say, "You have no idea who you just did this to." 30 minutes later, the plane begins an emergency descent. Passengers whisper. Crew members scatter. Someone starts filming. But the man in two-way, he sits calmly. Because this isn't chaos. It's consequence. They thought he was just another nobody in a nice suit. What they didn't know, he was one of the people who built the system they just tried to humiliate him in. And this tray wasn't a meal. It was a matchstick. You ever see someone get served something so outrageous? You knew it wasn't about food. It was about erasure. If you felt that kind of quiet fury, say nothing. Or say, "I've seen it too." Mike Tyson didn't walk onto the plane like he had something to prove. He walked on like he didn't owe anyone an explanation. Because he didn't. The boarding agent had barely looked up when he scanned his pass. First class, C2A, American Airlines Flight AA-134, JFK to LAX. But she paused when she saw his face. Black, mid-40s, broad build, navy suit tailored like it belonged in a magazine. He nodded politely. She didn't nod back. Mike was used to it. Inside the jet bridge, he caught the first look. A blonde woman in a flight crew uniform. Not young, not old. The type who's been working long enough to know every rule and how to bend them. She clocked him the second he stepped into first class. Watched his shoulders, his walk, the seat he took to a window. Priority. She didn't smile, just lingered, like he didn't quite belong, like she was waiting for him to make a mistake. He didn't give her one. Mike put his carry-on overhead, sat down, and folded his jacket neatly on his lap. From the outside, he looked relaxed, but he was already noting things. The crew greeting passengers in other rows, skipping his. The look exchanged between two attendants at the galley. The fact that everyone around him was being offered water or champagne. Except him. He didn't press the call button, didn't wave them down. He just looked at the time, 9:13 a.m., and made a note on his phone. No greeting. No welcome drink. Cabin crew made eye contact, walked past. 2A. The man in 2C beside him had a wedding ring and an expensive watch, mid-50s, white. He glanced at Mike, then at the cabin crew, then back again. Mike caught it. The man was noticing too, but he didn't say anything. Most people don't. A few minutes later, the blonde woman returned. She smiled at the passengers across from Mike, then turned away without acknowledging him. That made it clear. This wasn't a fluke. It was intentional invisibility, the kind that doesn't come with slurs or shouting. Just silence. Erasure. The seat Mike had paid for was his. But the service? That belonged to their discretion. He opened his tablet, started reviewing a report. His face didn't show a thing, but his mind was collecting names. At 9:41 a.m., the plane took off. Smooth climb. At 10:07 a.m., beverage service began. Mike didn't get served. The cart skipped his row. Again, no tray, no question, no contact. The man in 2C noticed this time. "You didn't want anything?" he asked. Mike replied without looking up, "I wasn't offered." The man raised an eyebrow, just slightly, but said nothing more. Mike opened the notes app again. Beverage service skipped. No menu. Third time ignored. Same blonde attendant overseeing. He wasn't surprised. Mike had spent over a decade in the military. Then 20 years building businesses, logistics, infrastructure, silent partnerships. He'd stepped into boardrooms where no one looked like him and left as the controlling stakeholder. People always underestimated him. He used to try to correct them. Now, he let them speak first, then remembered everything. As the plane crossed Ohio, turbulence made the lights flicker slightly. The blonde woman passed through again, checking belts. She stopped at Mike's row, glanced at him, and walked on without a word. The man in 1A got a full, "Are you doing all right today, sir?" Mike got nothing. But again, he didn't react. He made no scene. He just tapped twice on the screen of his tablet. bookmarking a document. Then opened the camera app, lifted it slightly, took a discreet photo of the cabin crew ID pinned to her shirt. F. Daniels, Senior In-Flight Manager. Saved it. No sound. No flash. He knew this game. They expect the target to get loud, to snap, to curse, to break character. That's when they pull the aggressive card. That's when they claim they felt unsafe. Mike wasn't giving them that. He was playing chess. Let them think they're in control. They never see it coming when the checkmate is quiet. When the meal service finally came near, 10:42 a.m., Mike still hadn't received a single word from any crew member. He didn't even expect it anymore. He just watched as other passengers were offered steak or pasta, asked if they had dietary needs. All while the woman who kept skipping him paused at the galley, looked at his seat, then looked away. That's when Mike leaned back, folded his hands, and smiled just barely. He knew what part was coming next. Not today, but soon. The moment they'd cross a line they couldn't walk back from. He wasn't hoping for it. He was ready for it. Mike Tyson had seen a lot of systems in his life. Military, corporate, federal, private sector. And if there was one thing he knew better than most, it was how systems quietly made people disappear. Not by force, by paperwork, by protocol, by omission, by pretending you're not there long enough that you start to wonder if you ever were. This flight was no different. Except this time, they'd chosen the wrong man to make invisible. It started with the name. He'd heard the boarding agent say it, just loud enough for the man behind him to hear. Mitchell Tyson, first class boarding now. His jaw didn't twitch. His posture didn't shift. He just nodded, scanned his pass, and walked in. He hadn't used the name Mitchell in 30 years. His full ticket, the digital one, said Michael A. Tyson. The Mitchell entry wasn't a typo. It was a manual override. He flagged it mentally. Entry 1, name alteration at gate. Time, 9:12 a.m. Then came the seat assignment check. He had scanned in perfectly. But at the cabin door, the blonde senior crew member stopped him. Sir, can I see your boarding pass again? No greeting, no smile. He handed it over wordlessly. She studied it like it was fake, like she was waiting for an error. 2A, she repeated. Yes, he said. A pause. All right. He sat down. She didn't say welcome. She didn't offer a drink. She turned and walked away. Entry 2. Seat challenged by crew despite valid pass. No courtesy. 9:18 a.m. The next piece of the system was subtler. The service protocol. In first class, service isn't just about luxury. It's about rhythm, sequence, standards. Greet each passenger. Offer welcome beverage. Provide menu. Take meal preference. None of that came to him. Not once. Everyone else in the cabin received the standard treatment. Names used. Smiles offered. Questions asked. Mike? Ignored. Twice. Other crew walked right past him. The third time he made eye contact. They looked away. He opened his tablet. Logged into a blank document titled AA 134 Cabin Record. Typed 10:07 a.m. No menu provided. A passenger in 2B received meal options verbally. I received none. Beverage service skipped. Then it got more interesting. The crew began referring to him subtly as a special status passenger, but not in the way airlines mean. He heard one of them whispering behind the galley curtain, say, he's not in our CRM log. That's odd. Not in the customer relationship management system? Impossible. His executive platinum status had been locked in for years. He opened his American Airlines app to check. Error. Profile not found. He tapped again. Logged out. Logged in. Error. Access denied. Mike didn't panic. He just took a screenshot. Save a time. 10:19 a.m. Entry 4. Mid-flight profile disappearance. He waited. Waited as they served champagne to 2D. Waited as they chatted with 1A about his business trip. Waited as they skipped over him again. This time with visible avoidance. At this point, it was systemic. Not one incident, but many. Not loud, but coordinated. At 10:31 a.m., a new attendant, younger, hesitant, approached him for the first time. Excuse me, sir. Could I get your name again? For the meal manifest. He looked at her calmly. It should already be there. She blinked. Yes, I'm just rechecking. Mike said nothing. She left, didn't return. He looked around. Everyone else had their meal tray. He had nothing. The system had moved into phase 2. Exclusion under confusion. Don't deny him directly. Just delay. Misdirect. Lose the file. Make him question whether the mistake was ever personal. He knew it wasn't a glitch. He knew it was deliberate fog. He tapped another line into his tablet. Flight manifest access blocked. Name Michael Tyson not acknowledged by any crew member. Meal delay extended past full cabin service. Attachment. Photo of his boarding pass with correct name. Time logged. 10:37 a.m. It would have been easier if they had just said it. If one of them had just looked him in the face and said, "You don't belong here." But that's not how these systems work. They don't tell you to leave. They just refuse to see you until you walk out on your own. Mike had watched this pattern since he was 10. In school, in the army, in boardrooms. This time, they thought a luxury airline cabin would be enough to hide it behind professionalism. They were wrong. At 10:43 a.m., the blonde lead reappeared. She walked slowly down the aisle, stopping to talk to 3C, a man in a golf pullover. They laughed. She handed him a second glass of wine. She passed Mike again. No eye contact, just a breeze of citrus perfume and control. That was the moment he knew. She wasn't acting alone. This was the culture, the system, and somewhere behind it was someone trying to make sure he knew exactly how unwelcome he was. Without ever saying a word, he put his tablet down, unlocked his phone, opened a folder labeled AA-134 Live Records, snapped a photo of the galley, then a time-stamped screenshot of the app, still showing error, then a silent audio recording. 2 minutes of cabin crew talking 3 rows behind him. He didn't need to post it. Not yet. He just needed the pattern. And he had it. The man next to him leaned over. "You okay?" Mike looked over. Nodded once. "Are you?" The man hesitated. "Guess I should have said something earlier." "You didn't have to," Mike said. "But now you're part of the record." By the time the carts were being retracted and the cabin was settling, Mike still had no tray, no menu, no name. He wasn't served. He was intentionally excluded, erased in real time, on a plane where he held the same boarding class, same seat value, and higher investment in the airline than most of the board of directors. But no one knew, and he wasn't going to tell them. Not yet. Because systems like this, they collapse best when they don't see the pressure building. Mike wasn't here to demand better treatment. He was here to watch it fail on its own record. It started like a reset. At 11:07 a.m., Mike Tyson finally received a visit from the blonde lead attendant, the one who hadn't acknowledged him once since boarding. She had a tray, covered, silver dome, crisp white napkin, real cutlery. Finally, he thought, maybe they'd realized. Maybe this was the course correction. She set it down in front of him. No eye contact. Still no name. Then that smile. Not kind. Not apologetic. Just tight. Sharp. Fake. She reached for the dome and lifted it slowly, like she was unveiling a gift. What sat on the plate wasn't a meal. It was a dead rat. Small. Gray. Curled tail. Whiskers. Ears. Fur still intact. Its body rested on a pristine white dinner plate. No garnish. No sauce. Just rat. On linen. In first class. Mike stared at it. So did everyone around him. For a second, there was no sound at all. Then she spoke. Soft. Controlled. "This felt more appropriate for your taste, don't you think?" She smiled again, almost dared him to react. Someone behind him gasped audibly. Another passenger let out a whispered, "Oh my God." Mike didn't flinch. He didn't push the plate away. He didn't even blink. He looked up straight at her, with a stillness that could cut glass. "You're going to want to walk that back." His voice was calm, even precise. She held her ground for one full beat too long, then turned and walked away like nothing had happened. No one moved. C2C, the man beside Mike, looked stunned. He turned to Mike like he wanted to say something, then stopped. 2 rows behind, a woman took out her phone slowly, hiding it behind a magazine. Nobody knew what to do, but everyone knew what they'd seen. Mike reached into his inner jacket pocket, pulled out his phone. No fumbling, no panic. He opened an app, not for public use. an encrypted interface reserved for emergency escalation across several organizations. He tapped a saved contact. AA, Executive Ops, Legal Immediate. Spoke clearly. This is Michael Tyson. Shareholder ID 812-0039. I'm currently on board AA-134, C2A. I've been served a dead rodent as a meal in what I believe is an intentional act of racial hostility. Requesting immediate corporate-level escalation. Log this at 11:10 a.m. Eastern. The voice on the other end responded within seconds. Understood, Mr. Tyson. We're activating Protocol 14 Delta. Please remain seated. The captain will be advised. Next action in under 10 minutes. Mike ended the call, slid his phone back into his pocket, and stared at the plate. Still not touching it. Still calm. In the galley, the crew were whispering. She, the lead, was laughing quietly, until the younger attendant who had tried to help earlier said something that made her stop. Mike couldn't hear it, but he could see her face change, from smug to confused, then from confused to concerned. At 11:19 a.m., the captain's voice came overhead. Ladies and gentlemen, we've received information regarding a critical issue on board. Out of an abundance of caution, we are initiating an emergency diversion to Charlotte Douglas International Airport. Estimated time to landing is 24 minutes. Please remain seated. The blonde woman froze, then turned sharply toward the flight deck, whispered something to another crew member. Now the passengers were wide-eyed. The man in 1B turned around in his seat, looking toward Mike. Not accusatory, just trying to understand. Everyone knew something big had happened, but no one could name it out loud, because it hadn't come with shouting. Just silence, just power. At 11:23 a.m., the crew came by to collect trays. One of the younger attendants, not the blonde, approached Mike, eyes wide, face pale. Mr. Tyson, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. He looked up, just nodded once. She took the tray, carried it away like it was radioactive. The blonde didn't return. She stayed in the galley, checking her phone, pacing slightly, sweat beginning to show just above her lip. Her hands trembled, barely, but enough for the younger attendant to notice. She didn't smile anymore. At 11:34 a.m., Mike received a secure message on his phone. AA, Exec OPS, touchdown confirmed at Charlotte. We are on the ground with legal and executive presence. Captain has been briefed. You will be the first offboarded. Incident under federal review. No further action needed. Mike put the phone away, checked his watch, folded his napkin, adjusted his cufflinks, then sat back and waited for the wheels to hit the ground. 11:55 a.m. Touchdown. Smooth landing. No applause. No announcements. The plane taxied past the main terminal. It pulled up to a private gate, separate from all others. 3 SUVs. 2 executives in suits. 1 woman with a Department of Transportation badge. The jet bridge connected. The captain didn't speak, but the cabin door opened, and they stepped in. No one said a word as they walked past the first row. The lead man, early 50s, pinstripe suit, AA, lapel pin, looked around and said firmly, Mr. Tyson? Mike stood, grabbed his bag, nodded once. The man extended his hand. I'm Michael Langley, EVP of Customer Experience and Legal Liaison for American Airlines. We're here on behalf of the board and security team. You're safe now, and we're going to take this seriously. Mike didn't shake his hand. He simply said, I hope you log everything. Langley nodded. I already have. As Mike walked toward the exit, he passed her. The blonde woman, frozen, white as the linen she'd folded an hour ago. He didn't say anything, didn't stop. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out, just wide, glassy eyes and a throat tightening with panic. She didn't know who he was, but she knew now what she'd done and what it was about to cost her. The jet bridge locked into place with a click that seemed louder than it was. Silence filled the first-class cabin. The passengers hadn't moved. No one was told to deplane. The captain had said only one thing over the PA. We're asking passengers to remain seated as we handle situation. We appreciate your patience. That was 7 minutes ago. Now, the cabin door opened, and 3 people stepped in. The first was Michael Langley, Executive Vice President of Customer Experience for American Airlines, tall, fast-walking, face tense, but trained. Beside him, Elaine Ross, Senior Legal Liaison for Compliance. Slim, glasses, holding a leather portfolio close to her chest like a shield. Behind them, a man who didn't wear a uniform, but whose presence said authority. DOT badge on his waist. Federal level. The passengers looked up, murmuring. Everyone could feel it. Something wasn't normal. Langley spotted Mike instantly. He moved toward him, hand extended, trying to look calm but respectful. "Mr. Tyson," he said, voice just above a whisper. "On behalf of American Airlines and the board, we want to formally apologize. May we speak with you privately? We've arranged a secure space." Mike stood slowly. He didn't shake the hand. He nodded once, before following. He said loud enough for the two closest rows to hear, "You may want to keep your crew in place. This isn't over." Then he stepped off the plane. They didn't take him far, just an empty boarding area, roped off by two airport police officers. No press, no cameras, just 6 seats, and 2 suitcases that didn't belong to anyone anymore. Langley began first. "Mr. Tyson, we were alerted to the incident through corporate escalation, code 14 Delta. You'd be glad to know the entire call was logged, recorded, and time-stamped in our legal system within 90 seconds of receipt." Mike said nothing. He sat down, crossed one leg over the other. Langley continued. "We've already started internal investigation protocol. The employee responsible will be suspended immediately pending termination. She has no legal protection for this kind of offense. No union clause applies." "Good," Mike said. Langley hesitated, then added, "We were not aware of your position at first." Mike turned his head slightly. "Oh." Langley cleared his throat, fidgeted. "I mean, of course your treatment is unacceptable regardless. But once we realized you were..." Elaine stepped in, "Our single largest private stakeholder, by proxy through Tyson Global Holdings." "Now," Mike smiled just barely, "you did your homework. We're still doing it." He reached into his carry-on and pulled out a thin black folder. "Open it slowly." Inside were printed screenshots time-stamped, with metadata, showing every stage of the discrimination. Boarding agent calling him Mitchell. App errors showing profile lockout. Service denial photos. The tray with the rat, captured by another passenger and sent to his secure number. The crew ID tag from a woman who delivered it. Langley looked through them, face turning colder with each page. "I've also included your own internal CRM screen," Mike added. "That shows you did have my correct name on file before boarding. That means the alteration was manual." Elaine stared at the printout, silent. Finally, Langley sat back. "I don't know what to say." Mike didn't answer. Instead, he pulled out a sealed document, red-tabbed. "Say nothing. Just sign this." Langley froze. Elaine took the envelope, slid it open, and scanned the document quickly. It was a legal stipulation not for payment, not for silence, but for data release. The entire incident, including the full cabin audio and internal messages, was to be submitted to 1. The Department of Transportation's Office of Civil Rights. 2. The FAA Oversight Panel on In-Flight Conduct. 3. A third-party media law firm representing a group of passengers on board. Langley looked up. "You want to go public?" Mike's eyes didn't move. "I want it logged, not buried. You can decide what happens after that." Langley didn't speak for a full 10 seconds, then signed. Elaine initialed, time-stamped it. Done. Back on the plane. Word had spread. Someone had posted a blurry photo of the tray on Reddit. It was already being upvoted. The caption read, "First-class passenger served this after being skipped for 3 hours. Pretty sure this is about to blow up." The blonde attendant, F. Daniels according to the ID, was pacing near the galley, holding her phone like it could save her. She hadn't spoken in 20 minutes. No one had come to her defense. Even the pilots had refused to make eye contact when she asked what was happening. At 12:24 p.m., Langley and Elaine stepped back onto the aircraft. Langley addressed the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We've completed our initial investigation. The incident on board has been logged as a Category 1 internal escalation." He didn't mention names. He didn't have to. Every first-class passenger knew exactly who it was about. Then he turned to Daniels, asked her to step forward. She did, trying to hold dignity and posture. But her mouth was trembling. Langley handed her a folded letter. This is an immediate suspension of duties pending full review. You're no longer authorized to represent this airline in any capacity. She opened her mouth to speak. Langley held up a hand. This isn't a discussion. She looked around. No one met her eyes. She walked off the plane without a word, just the sound of her heels on the carpet. Mike watched from a gate window as she disappeared into the terminal, flanked by a supervisor and a security staffer. Langley turned to him. We can route you to LA on the next flight, or book you through Delta. First class. Mike raised an eyebrow. I already booked Delta 15 minutes ago. Langley blinked. You did? I did, Mike said. He handed over a printed transfer notice. I also pulled my remaining $47 million in equity, effective immediately. Tyson Global Holdings has reallocated its aviation investments fully. Langley opened his mouth, closed it. There were no words, just numbers. And those numbers were now gone. Mike walked away calmly. No anger, no headline, just the quiet satisfaction of watching a door close behind him and knowing it would never open the same way again. They hadn't just disrespected a passenger. They disrespected an owner, a builder, someone who knew the system better than the people trying to weaponize it against him. Mike Tyson didn't follow them to the executive lounge. He sat by gate D12 in a quiet corner of the terminal, next to a vending machine that hadn't worked in years. He wanted the public space. He wanted the openness, because it was time things stopped happening behind closed doors. Elaine Ross, the airline's legal rep, arrived first. Langley, the EVP, followed moments later, carrying a rolling case and a look that said this meeting wasn't going to be easy. And finally, flanked by airport security, F. Daniels, the blonde flight supervisor, was brought in. No uniform now, just a wrinkled blouse, her badge confiscated. Her face a mix of arrogance and fear. She still hadn't said a word to Mike. Now she'd be forced to. You sure you want to do this here? Langley asked quietly, eyeing the seating area. Absolutely, Mike said, without looking up from his phone. Elaine sat opposite him, opening a legal pad. Langley sat beside her. F. Daniel stood. Mike looked at her, expression unreadable. Then said, she did. He pulled out a manila folder, placed it on the table, and opened it slowly. The first page, a high-resolution still of the rat on the plate, cropped, centered, time-stamped. He flipped the next, the photo of her ID badge from earlier that morning. Next, a full transcript of crew communications from Flight AA-134's internal messaging system, pulled under subpoena power the moment emergency escalation had been triggered. Mike tapped the document. Page 4. Read it out loud. Daniels froze. Langley leaned over, scanned it, and winced. Elaine blinked. Mike repeated more quietly, read it. Daniel's voice cracked. 2A is one of those I paid like you types. Let's see how long he lasts without service. Sent 10:27 a.m. Flight altitude 34,000 feet. No one said anything. He turned the page. Page 6. Still refusing to acknowledge him. Not even a drink. Just let it stack. 10:44 a.m. He flipped to page 9. Page 9, please. Daniels whispered, bringing him the special tray now. You'll love this one. 11:06 a.m. The handwriting in the log wasn't just hers. Another crew member had responded. Be careful. Cameras everywhere. Mike leaned back. Did you think I wouldn't get access to this? Daniels finally spoke. Her voice was small, defensive. I didn't mean it like that. It was a joke. A bad one. I didn't. He cut her off. You're 39 years old. You've been in this company for over a decade. You are trained, certified, licensed, and yet, in a pressurized metal tube full of cameras, witnesses, and federal oversight, you chose to dehumanize a passenger with a racial gesture last used in 1964 Mississippi. Daniels blinked rapidly. Her hand shook. I didn't think it would. I didn't know who you were. That's the point, Mike said. He reached into the folder again, pulled out another document. This one marked, Internal HR Report, sealed confidential. He slid it to Elaine. Langley read over her shoulder. Daniels went pale. The file detailed 3 previous incidents involving Daniels over the last 6 years. One for refusing to serve a black passenger a meal she claimed was out of stock. One for mocking an Asian child's accent during a pre-flight greeting. One sealed report from a former crew member alleging racist remarks in private channels. Closed with no disciplinary action. I was clear to those, she said, voice rising. Mike didn't flinch. You were protected, he corrected. Until now. Langley finally spoke. What outcome are you seeking? Mike looked him in the eye. Justice, transparency, and a message. Elaine nodded slowly. You'll get it. Daniels stood up suddenly. You want to ruin my life over this? Mike looked at her. For the first time, not with coldness, but with finality. I didn't ruin anything. You did. And then, you just didn't expect the man you tried to erase to own the system you tried to use. She sat back down. Hard. Mike took a breath. Then opened his phone, scrolled, found a photo, turned it to face the table. It was a picture of his daughter, 12 years old, smiling, in a cockpit during a flight tour American Airlines had sponsored 2 years ago. She wants to be a pilot, he said, voice quieter now. She still believes the sky is fair. That hard work means something. That people like you don't get to decide who gets served and who gets discarded. Daniels looked down. I'm not here for revenge, Mike added. I'm here to make sure she never sees what I saw today. Not from someone in a uniform. Langley stood. We'll move forward immediately. Public statement. Internal review. Full cooperation with federal oversight. You have my word. Elaine added. And permanent revocation of this individual's license to operate in the commercial aviation sector. Daniels looked up sharply. You can't, you don't have the authority. Actually, Elaine said softly, we do. Mike stood too. I'm done here. He picked up the folder, placed it back in his case, and turned to leave. Then paused, looked over his shoulder. You're not being erased, he said to her. You're just finally being seen exactly for who you are. And then he walked away. It should have been over. After the confrontation at Charlotte, after the termination was processed, after the files were logged and forwarded to 3 federal agencies. Mike Tyson expected the system to do what it rarely does, hold itself accountable. But that's not what systems like this do. They don't collapse quietly. They fight back. It began the next morning. A headline on a mid-tier news site. Lightly sensational, but just vague enough to seem objective. Passenger incident sparks flight diversion. Airline investigate threatening behavior toward crew. Byline. Reposted from syndicated partner outlet. The article was filled with non-specifics. A high-profile passenger allegedly caused disruption in cabin. A female crew member felt endangered. The plane was diverted out of caution. No mention of a rat. No mention of racial targeting. No mention of Mike's role as a stakeholder. Just implication. That word again. Threatening. The one they always use when a black man doesn't back down. Mike stared at the screen in his hotel room. Calm. He recognized the strategy. Step 1, leak a half story. Step 2, activate narrative confusion. Step 3, force the victim to explain himself while the perpetrator vanishes. He had seen it happen to colleagues, friends, even strangers. Now it was his turn. Then came the video. Grainy footage, clearly edited, from a passenger in seat 3B. It showed Mike speaking to the blonde crew member after she set down the tray. No sound, no context, just his body, tall, composed, serious, standing, speaking firmly. The post caption? This guy got us grounded. Everyone missed connections. He was yelling about some rat, but I didn't see anything, just ego. And the comments exploded. Another rich dude throwing a tantrum. Entitled energy. If he was so important, why didn't he just ask to speak to a supervisor instead of scaring everyone? This is why you don't give everyone first class. Langley called within the hour. We're working on it, he said quickly. PR is spinning hard. Mike interrupted. You're not working on it. You're reacting to it. Big difference. Langley exhaled. There's more. What now? She filed an EEOC complaint. Mike paused. She's claiming gender-based retaliation? Langley winced. Her legal team is reframing the incident, suggesting she was harassed for doing her job, and delivering a customer complaint item that was, quote, a misinterpreted prop. Mike almost laughed. She's saying the rat was a prop? Langley didn't answer. Because yes, that's exactly what she was saying. By day 2, a right-leaning media outlet had picked up the story. The headline: airline crew member fired after serving passenger satirical meal. Cancel culture or misunderstanding? They had a quote from her attorney. Ms. Daniels was simply attempting to deliver a light-hearted joke regarding passenger dissatisfaction. It was never intended to offend. The airline overreacted under pressure from an aggressive male figure with financial power. Now it was open season. Social media split into two predictable halves. One side reposted the tray photo, still frame, uncropped, undeniable. The other side questioned its authenticity. How do we know it wasn't planted? That could be photoshopped. Where's the airline footage? Why didn't he report it immediately if it was real? Mike had. The call log, the escalation, the security response, all time-stamped. But now, he was being forced to prove what had already been proven. That was the trick. You don't have to erase the truth. Just exhaust it. On day 3, Mike received an unexpected notification. His access to the American Airlines internal shareholder portal had been suspended pending investigation. No warning, no explanation, just a temporary lockout. He opened the portal from a different device. Same result. He called Langley. Voicemail. He texted Elaine. No reply. For the first time since this began, he felt it. They were pulling away. He stood by the airport window that evening, watching a jet take off, trailing light over the dark skyline. This wasn't just about a crew member anymore. This was about the system protecting itself. They had cut him off, softly, but strategically. Not loud, not final, just enough to stall, to isolate, to make him feel alone in a story he owned. He opened his notebook, the same one from the flight, flipped back to page 1, reread every log, every timestamp, every ignored moment. He remembered who he was. Mike Tyson, not the boxer, the architect, the man who didn't yell, the man who documented everything while they watched him vanish. His phone buzzed. Blocked number. He answered. A deep voice spoke. I saw what they did. I used to work there. Mike stayed quiet. I sent something to your secure inbox. A folder. She's not working alone. You need to see what's in it. The line went dead. Mike checked his encrypted mail. There it was. Folder. Internal ops redacted. He downloaded it. Inside, a chain of emails from 3 weeks before the flight. Subject line: high visibility passenger flagged. Notes below. One message stood out. From an internal ops manager to F. Daniels. To A flagged for secondary handling. He's vocal, historically demanding. Keep comms minimal. Don't over-accommodate. Sent. 6:43 a.m. Day of flight. Mike stared at it. Then again. Then saved it to 3 different devices. It was proof. This wasn't about one person. This was about a coordinated instruction, a playbook, and now he was holding it. He hadn't slept. Mike Tyson had spent the last 2 nights in a quiet hotel outside Charlotte Airport. Phone in one hand, legal documents in the other, and a war inside his head. They were trying to erase the truth with distraction, to bury clarity under confusion. And for a moment, even he had doubted whether the story would survive. That changed at 5:42 a.m. Day 4. His phone buzzed. An encrypted push notification. Subject line: you don't know me, but I know what I saw. There was a link. Mike clicked it and watched. The footage was shaky, vertical, and low resolution, but it was real. It showed the exact moment F. Daniels walked down the aisle, holding the tray. It showed her smirk, her tone, her placement of the silver dome. It captured the line, clear as day. This felt more appropriate for your taste. The tray cloche lifted, a gasp, and the rat, unmistakable, still, and horrible, laid out in the center of a first-class plate. Then the camera turned slightly, enough to see your face. Smiling, Mike exhaled slowly. It wasn't just proof. It was irrefutable. The video was attached with a note. My name's Carla. I was in 2F. I didn't say anything then, and I've regretted it every day since. But I recorded it, in case something happened. I sent it to a few news outlets too. "You're not crazy. They were wrong." He messaged back, "You just changed everything." By 7 a.m., the video had gone viral. It hit Reddit's front page, then Twitter, then Instagram Reels. Within 2 hours, CNN ran a digital headline: "Passenger video contradicts airline's account in in-flight incident." NBC News followed: "Rat on a plate. Racial abuse or rogue prank. New video suggests clear malice." And then, something happened that Mike didn't expect. At 9:26 a.m., a man appeared in the hotel lobby, mid-40s, janitor's uniform, American Airlines insignia. He walked slowly toward the front desk and quietly asked for Mr. Tyson. Mike came down 5 minutes later, confused but alert. The man introduced himself: "Luis Herrera. I cleaned the galley on that flight. I wasn't supposed to see it, but I did." Mike blinked. Luis opened folder. Inside, a photo of the rat, taken in the crew prep area before the meal service started. Timestamp: 11:04 a.m., 2 minutes before she delivered it. Luis pointed. "That's the prep table. That's her glove." She was laughing with another crew member. I thought it was some hazing joke, but after the video dropped, he paused. I knew what it was. I couldn't stay quiet. Mike took the photo, studied the metadata. Genuine, unedited. By noon, the case flipped. American Airlines legal team, once guarded, sent Mike an urgent request to discuss revisiting the public narrative. Mike declined. "I don't negotiate with people still spinning." He had something better than lawyers now: the people. At 1:17 p.m., a small YouTube channel posted a 12-minute breakdown of the case, compiled from the viral video, audio logs from the flight, FAA released documents from Mike's initial escalation, the photo from Luis, a read aloud of the original leaked internal message, 2, a flag for secondary handling. The video gained 1.2 million views in 5 hours. The comments section exploded. "This man kept receipts while they kept gaslighting. Whoever tried to spin this needs to be fired too. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was systemic." At 3:03 p.m., a former flight attendant named Renee Wilson came forward on LinkedIn. She posted a formal resignation letter and a statement. "I worked with F. Daniels in 2019. I filed an internal report about her discriminatory behavior toward 2 passengers. Nothing happened. I left the company in 2020. Watching that video today broke something in me. To Mr. Tyson, I'm sorry I didn't say something sooner." Mike saw the post, shared it silently, and replied, "You said it now. That matters." By that evening, every major news outlet had picked up the story. American Airlines issued a second, updated public statement. "We acknowledge the new evidence brought forward by passengers and former staff. This behavior does not reflect our values or policies. We are reopening the internal review process with third-party oversight." But it was too late. The story was no longer in their hands. Mike sat on a bench near the airfield, the wind pulling lightly at his sleeves. He had no need to speak anymore. Every piece they tried to hide, every detail they blurred, had come back from the shadows. Not from inside the boardroom, not from corporate, but from ordinary people who refused to let this be buried. In less than 48 hours, the consequences began. FAA confirmed it would launch an ethics probe into airline reporting behavior. Civil rights groups filed formal complaints with the DOT. 2 of Daniels' former managers were placed on administrative leave. And most importantly, the board of American Airlines issued an internal memo confirming the shareholder lockout on Mike's account was being reversed immediately, with public apology to follow. But that didn't matter most to him. What mattered was what happened at 7:43 p.m. when his daughter called. She had seen the video. She'd read the stories, and she asked him, "Daddy, did you really not say anything back? Not even yell?" He smiled, tired but calm. "No." "Why?" "Because I didn't need to," he said. "They heard me anyway." It didn't fall all at once. American Airlines didn't explode in flames or headlines or a single press conference. It cracked, slowly, visibly, and in every direction, just like Mike knew it would. Because when you shake the system that's built on pretending things are just fine, it doesn't fight you directly. It breaks from the inside. The first crack came from within. Elaine Ross, the legal officer who had sat across from Mike during the early days, formally resigned 11 days after the public apology. Her resignation letter leaked. It wasn't subtle. I can no longer serve a structure that prioritizes public image over internal integrity. We failed to act on early reports. We silenced accountability. That is no longer a system I can ethically protect. It spread like wildfire. Suddenly, every journalist who had been shut out came knocking. And this time, doors opened. An anonymous whistleblower, believed to be someone from investor relations, sent out a package to 3 news outlets. It contained internal chat logs from crew groups, a risk matrix marking certain passenger profiles for reduced service engagement, a document labeled Executive Watch List with Mike Tyson's name listed, flag for oversight management. CNN ran the headline first. Document shows airline flagged black executive investor as high-risk passenger. Weeks before incident. That was the breaking point. The story wasn't about a tray anymore. It was about a system designed to politely punish certain kinds of people for having access they weren't supposed to have. Within 72 hours, 3 mid-level managers were placed on leave. An internal audit was announced. 2 sitting board members voluntarily stepped down, and the company's chief operating officer was suspended pending investigation. The press tried to chase Mike for interviews. He gave none. He didn't show up on CNN. He didn't write an op-ed. He didn't launch a podcast. Instead, he was seen quietly at a youth aviation mentorship program in Houston, talking to a group of 16-year-old Black and Latino students about air traffic logistics. "Why didn't you go on TV?" one student asked. Mike smiled. "I wasn't trying to become a story." "But you are one," the boy replied. Mike paused. "Then let it be when they can't spin." Back at headquarters, the panic was real. Shareholder meetings turned into interrogations. Investors demanded transparency about how many other flagged passenger profiles existed. The company was forced to admit that the system had tagged over 1,200 passengers in 2 years based on behavioral indicators. 70% of them people of color. It wasn't a glitch. It was policy, one disguised as safety. Regulators stepped in. The Department of Transportation launched a full Title VI investigation. So did the FAA. So did 3 congressional subcommittees. Terms like institutional profiling and shareholder discrimination made it into formal review documents. For the first time in the company's 97-year history, a full structural audit was being conducted not for money, but for bias. The PR department tried to save face. They released new ads, diversity slogans, training initiatives. Mike saw the billboards, didn't say a word. He knew you don't fix rot with slogans. You burn out the roots. He made one move, quiet but massive. He sold the last of a stake in American Airlines, moved it to 3 smaller carriers, JetBlue, Alaska, and a new regional Black-owned airline called Phoenix Air, headquartered in Atlanta. When asked why, in a closed-door investment Q&A, he simply said, "I no longer fund what I don't trust." That quote leaked too, and became a meme. 1 week later, the former CEO of American Airlines issued a private letter to staff. It was leaked by a newly hired assistant. It read, "The Mike Tyson incident didn't just cost us reputation. It revealed that we had stopped listening to the people we serve. And in doing so, we stopped deserving their trust." He retired 2 months early. His replacement? A woman who had once been passed over for VP because she lacked leadership presence. She was Indian American. And her first order of business? Publicly releasing the entire internal audit. By now, the world knew the name Mike Tyson not as a fighter, but as a systems architect, investor, and silent trigger of one of the largest cultural reckonings in the aviation industry. People waited for him to bask in it, to capitalize. He didn't. He was seen once, just once, 2 weeks later, standing alone by a gravestone in New Jersey. It belonged to his father, an Army vet, a man who had once told him, "You don't win by yelling. You win by making sure they have nothing left to say." He folded a small note, slid it under a stone, whispered something no one heard, then walked away. The ballroom at the National Aviation Policy Forum wasn't built for silence. It was built for handshakes, for panels, for speeches full of bullet points and buzzwords. But today, in the middle of a crowd of 400 executives, engineers, union leaders, and lobbyists, a name was whispered like it meant something again. Mike Tyson. He wasn't on stage. He wasn't scheduled. He wasn't even seated near the front. He stood at the back wall, next to the exit. Plain black suit. No tie. Name tag tucked in his jacket pocket. He wasn't here to be seen, just to witness. The moderator began a panel titled, Rewriting Accountability. Post-Crisis Recovery in Transportation Equity. Mike didn't flinch at the title. It was what they always called it, recovery. Not reckoning. Not responsibility. Just recovery. But then something happened he didn't expect. A speaker approached the mic. Late 40s. White. Gray suit. No notes. Mike knew that face. Andrew Collins. Senior VP of Airline Operations. He had been seated in 2C, right next to Mike on that flight. Had seen the rat. Had heard the line. Had said nothing. Andrew cleared his throat. I was asked to speak about regulatory strategy today, he began. But I'm going to talk about something else instead. The room shifted. Eyes turned. Phones tilted upward. He glanced briefly to the back and locked eyes with Mike for exactly 1 second. I was on flight 134. Now the silence was real. I watched a man be humiliated, Andrew said. I watched a system fail in real time. And I said nothing. He took a breath. I told myself all the usual things. It wasn't my place. I didn't have the full story. I didn't want to make a scene. But the truth is simpler than that. He looked down, then up. I was a coward. No one moved. There's a comfort in being neutral, he said, in being quiet. But neutrality is only neutral when you're not the one bleeding from it. He looked directly at Mike again, and I bled nothing that day, but I benefited from silence. He continued, I want to be very clear. This is not an apology. He doesn't owe me that opportunity. I don't deserve it. This is a confession that I was in the room, and I chose stillness. I thought he was no one. I thought he'd go quietly. I thought wrong. Mike didn't blink, didn't nod, didn't smile. He simply stood, arms crossed, and let the words fall exactly where they were supposed to. Not for him, for everyone else. After the panel, people clapped cautiously, not performatively, just enough to mark that something had shifted. Mike turned to leave before anyone could stop him. He made it halfway through the lobby before Andrew caught up. Mike, he turned. The man stood awkwardly, not extending his hand. I didn't come to ask for anything. Good, Mike said flatly. Andrew swallowed. I just needed you to hear it from me, not the mic. Mike waited. Andrew's voice lowered. I used to think knowing better wasn't my job. A pause. Now I know that's the only job. Mike studied him, then gave a single nod. Not of forgiveness, not of acceptance, just acknowledgement. That finally, after weeks of spin, lies, and corporate dance, someone had stood still long enough to face it. Later that night, Mike sat alone at the airport cafe, watching flights take off. A young woman, late 20s, came up shyly. Sir, were you the one from that flight? He looked up. She was nervous. I work ground control. Charlotte. I just wanted to say, I saw what they tried to do to you, and I stayed quiet too. I thought maybe you were someone untouchable. Mike took a sip of his coffee. I'm not untouchable, he said. She hesitated. But you made it through. Mike set the cup down. No, I made it visible. The next day, a brief piece ran in Aviation Today magazine, buried on page 7. No photo, no pull quote, just a headline, passenger accountability. When industry professionals speak too late, and finally speak anyway. The article listed no names, but everyone knew exactly who it was about, and who it wasn't. Because Mike never gave them a headline. He only left them with mirrors. The airport was half empty at 6:02 a.m. Not the part with windows and terminals and Starbucks lines. The other part, the back hallway at JFK, Terminal 8. Employee access only. No cameras, no suits, just a row of gray metal lockers, a flickering light, and a silence that felt almost too deliberate. Mike stood there, hands in his coat pockets, watching the corridor. He didn't belong there, not technically, but he had the code, and no one stopped him. He walked past the row of old cabinets, found the one with the worn-out tag, Retired Staff Archive, A/1996 to 2021. He opened it, Inside were manila folders, employee histories, disciplinary files, the kind of things that never made it into official press kits. Mike reached in and pulled out a slim file labeled Daniels Felicia F. He opened it, skimmed the first page. Final status: voluntarily resigned. No criminal action. Internal action complete. He pulled a pen from his coat, crossed it out, wrote, "Truth surfaced. Publicly exposed. Systemic issue confirmed. Not forgotten." Then he closed the folder, slid it back, and shut the drawer. Not with force, just finality. From there, he walked to gate 12B, where it had all begun 3 months ago. This gate had been nothing more than another access point, another link in a routine. Now it was a quiet monument to a fracture line. He stood behind the check-in desk, unattended at that hour, and looked at the monitor. It blinked. AA 134 status: retired. The flight number had been pulled from future rotations. Too recognizable. Too exposed. They'd replaced it with something sterile. AA 3274, a number no one would remember. He took a photo of the screen, not to post, just to keep, like a scar. At 7:10 a.m., he boarded another flight. This one wasn't commercial. It was a small regional connection to Albany, where his father was buried. He hadn't been back in years. The car ride from the airport was quiet. Snow flurried against the windshield. He arrived at the cemetery just as the groundskeeper was unlocking the gate. Mike nodded politely, walked past, and made his way to the third row, second plot on the right. Thomas Tyson, veteran, father, builder. The headstone was simple, too simple. Mike knelt down, brushed off the leaves, and placed a small folded paper on the base. It read, "I stayed calm, Dad. I didn't shout. I made them listen anyway. You were right. I didn't need to win out loud. I just had to stand where they couldn't move me. He stayed there for 17 minutes. Didn't cry, didn't speak, just sat until the cold reached through the wool coat and reminded him the world was still turning, and he wasn't finished yet. Back in New York, someone else was walking through a different hallway. A new hire, young, fresh pressed uniform, nervous but sharp. She stopped at the crew lounge, saw a plaque on the wall, and tilted her head. Passenger Incident 134. Reshaping accountability in the skies. For those who refuse to be invisible. No photo, just words. She turned to a supervisor. "Hey, what was Flight 134? The supervisor paused, then said, "The one that changed how we do things." The recruit stared at the plaque a moment longer, then whispered, mostly to herself, "Good." That afternoon, Mike visited one last place. A small nonprofit in Brooklyn, unmarked, no flashy website. He helped fund it quietly. The Flight Deck Project, a training program for kids of color who wanted to get into aviation without taking on a lifetime of debt. He didn't run it. He didn't name it after himself. He just showed up, sat with students, answered questions, reviewed charts. When one kid asked what happened on that flight, Mike said, "It was a moment." "And did you win?" Mike looked at him. "No one wins on a plane. You just survive it, then decide what to build when your feet touch ground again." That night, Mike returned to his apartment. No entourage, no press. He hung up his coat, unfolded the shirt from the day, sat down on the edge of the bed, and looked at his phone. No news alerts, no trending hashtags, just a message from a former Army buddy who had texted, "I saw what you did. You never raised your voice once. Damn proud of you." Mike smiled soft and real, then typed back, "You ever notice? When they try to erase you, they always forget you were the one holding the pen." He hit send, turned the phone face down, and finally turned off the light.